Commissioners Basin, Commissioner Malloy had surgery, so I think he's not coming. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Not from my end.
Approval of the February 15th workshop minutes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 15th workshop.
I'll second.
Approval, vote,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I guess we'll turn this over to Ben, and since we have just one item on the agenda.
All right. Yeah, good afternoon again, everybody. So this is kind of where we left off from our last workshop. I think this is a good pause point here. Just a bit of an introduction. Some of this, again, we've talked about before with the past group of planning commissioners, and so this will be an introduction to some of the newer commissioners. But there are a number of road infrastructure issues that have come up in staff's review as we've been looking at minor subdivisions, major subdivisions, more specifically relating to minor subdivisions. But we wanted to start, addressing some of these issues. So what we have done is we've identified, I think maybe it's four problems that we wanted to maybe tackle. Two of them we've spent some time on, the number 1 and number 2. And so it is going to be a little bit of a recap for those. But just to keep everybody up to on the same page. So just again, for introduction to this idea, is that one of the standards in our subdivision regulations for minor subdivisions is that if a subject parcel is wishing to be subdivided and it's being served by an existing private road, that means that the International Fire Code, or that road, would have to meet International Fire Code standards. One of the problems that the fire districts are experiencing and have shared with us is that some of their staff is equipped to do these types of inspections and analysis. Others are not. Others are volunteered, kind of supported, and so there's just a range of abilities in what these inspectors and commissioners are able to do. And so they have expressed interest, for us at least, to get some help and support in order to determine whether or not these roads do comply with International Fire Code. And so one of the solutions that we had proposed at the time as a result is to require the applicant to demonstrate that the road complies with the International Fire Code, rather than having the fire district go out there to determine this. Again, reasons being is that they are short-staffed. A lot of them, again, are not road designers or builders, but they are good at putting out fires. And so when we're asking them to comment on the driving surface, the width, the grade, the turning radiuses, and all these kinds of things, it's a little bit complex for them. And so, again, instead of putting it upon the fire districts to make this call, the idea was to put this on the applicant to demonstrate that the road leading up to the subdivision complies with the International Fire Code. So it says again here, require the applicant to demonstrate that it meets the standards or a deviation agreed by the applicable fire districts through analysis provided by a professional engineer. This demonstration will be required information for a complete application for a minor subdivision. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't know if you have any questions on that particular subject, or if you feel like the solution is maybe misplaced as well.
Well, for one thing, of course, these minor subdivisions, I think there's somewhat of a thought that because we have minor subdivisions because, or whatever you want to call them, because it's being done by somebody that's not going to spend a whole lot of money on the design or whatever of the subdivision. Of course, if you go to hire a professional engineer, I would change the language here that you have to have in the application for the subdivision, that the person applying for that application would have a licensed professional engineer certify the design of the roads that they're going to have in the subdivision, and they would also have a professional engineer certify that the construction was done in accordance with those provisions. Because if you don't have a follow-up with inspection, and the fire departments or whatever don't have any wherewithal to do it, it really is a worthless requirement, because no one will ever certify that it was done properly. And you guys don't have, the county doesn't have the engineering staff for that,
We're trying to hire it.
yeah, I know. I mean, still, I mean, you have any idea how, you'd have it, but, professional engineer, anytime I did work outside of working for the government, I'm talking 20 years ago, I charged $150 an hour. And now you'd be $300 or $400 an hour, yeah. So, I mean, we just need to understand, if we require this, these people doing these.
It'll be a cost.
It'll be a cost, but I don't know how else to handle it. I'm totally in support of, but I think we should make the language a little more plain, that the professional engineer certifies the design, and then a professional engineer certifies the final construction of the project.
Yeah, you're saying that reminds me, Ben, I think I broadened the language to say, or other recognized professionals. Because not just PEs can do roads, there's other people know how to do it.
Well, the problem though with, see, you have to depend upon the professional engineer's licensing requirements. If you, I don't know who else you might have.
A landscape architect could do it.
Yeah,
I am one, so I know. And I have taught professional engineers how to do this.
Yes, I know.
Because they don't get that training, as you know.
yeah, but the AIA or whatever, yeah.
So
They all have licensing requirements, yeah, and those, so you've got to have a licensed individual do it, not just
Someone
somebody.
is professional.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And it's not just when they apply, because a lot of these times, you know better than most, the roads aren't in, and they're not gonna be in until or unless we approve the subdivision, and then they build it before we record the plat.
Right, the idea, of course, is that we have, first off, an analysis done by this professional.
Right. For roads that are out there.
For existing private roads.
Right.
Yep. And so they will provide some analysis. That analysis will come to us through the application process. It'll go to the fire district for their review. But essentially what the professional is going to be demonstrating is that the road complies with IFC standards.
Right.
And if it doesn't, where its shortfalls are. And then what would need to
Now,
be
you're
done so
talking
the
about
applicant would
existing
know.
roads, but you would also have new proposals with new
Right,
roads.
and that's where your point about you need to be out there to observe it is all important. But I mean, it's kind of tough for the existing roads.
Is this
It
just
puts a real-
focused on existing roads?
It is, and the reason why it's focusing on existing roads is because there's a distinction between individual driveways,
Right.
common driveways.
Right.
Common driveways are not to exceed 4 lots per county code.
Mm-hmm.
And then from anything beyond that is a private road. Or if it's a new road, then that's gonna fall under a different standard altogether and would have to meet the highway district standards.
Right.
It has
So-
to meet the what standard?
The highway district standards currently.
Oh, for all new ones?
For all
Oh,
new
okay.
roads.
In a subdivision.
For all new roads to be constructed for subdivision purposes. Again, I want to make the distinction, if it's 4 or fewer, it's not considered to be a road, it's a common driveway at most, or individual driveway at the fewest, I guess, but.
Am I hearing this right, that the, meeting the highway district standards will not be retroactive, it would be going forward, is that what you're saying?
Right, so again, if an applicant is proposing to build a new road
Right.
to serve a subdivision, the code would require that new road be built to highway district standards.
What happens if an applicant is substantially redoing a road?
So that means
We've
it's
got
existing
some
then.
examples we could
It's,
pull up
it's
on the
existing,
screen.
but there's a
Yeah.
substantial change in the road, or they're reconstructing it. I guess I'll just say it, shouldn't they, at some point, bring it up to the standards of the highway district?
Well, that is, I think, part of a point of discussion, and I think we'll get into that, whether or not there's, some value in looking at a higher standard of a road rather than an international fire code standard. Again, this is currently what the code does allow, is for minor subdivisions to be served by an existing private road. And those roads need to be meeting the fire district standards, the International Fire Code. So regardless of if a lot of work is needed in order to bring it up to International Fire Code, if it's existing, the fire district essentially says, well, it's insufficient for whatever reason, and the applicant or developer is responsible for making all those improvements, whatever they may be. So that's really, there's no limit as far as how much improvements, or if it's so bad, then it must now become a highway district standard road. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, full disclosure, my partner represents some of the highway districts. And I know just from passing her in the hallway every now and then, grumbling that there's a great deal of frustration on the part of at least some of the highway districts, because they've felt like they've been sort of carved out of this process and are unable to really have a strong voice or to.
You
bring
can strike the
compliance.
sorta, they were carved out in 2016.
Right. And
That was purposeful by the then county commissioners.
And I did want to make a comment, if I could, Madam Chair, on the concept of costs, and I'd encourage us to think about costs in this way. Often when we say the term costs, we are focused on the cost to the applicant or the individual person. There's a concept in the law called externalities. It's a fancy term to mean that there are external costs relative to someone's behavior or conduct. For example, smoking is a good example. That the external cost to society from smoking, the secondhand smoke and cancer and so forth, finally was recognized, and the cost of it was so great that it became, eclipsed the value of the product to the society in a lot of ways. Motorcycle helmets, for example, are another example where, someone may independently choose not to wear a helmet, and then they get a head injury and they don't have enough insurance, and so the taxpayer has to pay for their rehabilitation. And in this context, we had, I think specifically, and I could be wrong, people correct me, we had one of the, I think it was maybe the fire department chiefs came in and described an incident where they went in to get someone who was badly injured on a roadway, and trying to get out, it caused re-injury or more injury to the person, and it was really difficult, and I can't remember if the person survived. But if you have, the whole point of what I'm saying there is there are considerable costs to society if you have dilapidated roads and problematic roads. So I just point that out because often the focus gets to be on the individual cost, the applicant or the person who's trying to exercise their liberties and freedoms without considering the cost, and often the future cost to others who don't have a voice at the table. So.
Yeah. I agree with Leander and Terry with that the cost to me, to whoever is submitting the proposal is, I would consider it rather nominal. It's several $100s, maybe less than $1,000. So that's actually a fairly nominal cost to this proposal. But I think for the new members on our commission, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just give us a synopsis of what the fire code road standards are the International Fire Code road standards. And I think we have some people here that might be able to help us with that.
Why, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, y'all. My name's Stuart Malley. I'm a professional engineer that does a lot of work here in Kootenai County, Bonner County, different areas. I'm representing a group of professional land development people, whether they be entitlement, they work in entitlement, which brings plans to y'all for subdivision, or engineers. So we've got surveyors involved as well. So we emailed y'all, what was it, a week ago, some private road standards. So the International Fire Code that y'all keep talking about is strictly a minimum requirements for geometric layout of a road. It doesn't tell you anything about how to surface it. It gives you, there's 5 or 6 different criteria. Your maximum grade, say a 10-foot length, you can't raise the road more than a foot in 10 feet. So that's your 10% grade. Any radius, the inside turn of any road, say the inside radius, has to be greater than 25 feet to accommodate the fire trucks to get through. And then if it's a deadhead, say you're going a common driveway, they tell you you either have to have a hammerhead or a full court, bubble at the end. So there's different hammerhead requirements. They have to be 120 feet long. And these are for roads. The fire code only addresses roads which are 20 foot in width. Kootenai County had to write their own, Kootenai County Fire District has written in that driveways can be 14 feet and common driveways can be 14 feet as well. That's one of the things they've done. So this is not what you would consider a road design standard at all, because it doesn't account for how many trips per day, what kind of surface you need, how to maintain that surface, to put something in place that's going to last for a while and be
And all
safe.
important, what's underneath the surface.
What's underneath the surface, yeah, because if you're building across a swamp, some marshy lands, a lot of these roads, I can take you around Hayden Lake, a project I'm working on right now. The dump trucks coming in and out have completely,
Pumped the road.
yeah, it's gone at this
Right.
point. The road's gone. So it's almost impassable at this point. So they're gonna have to repair it at the end of constructing this house on Hayden Lake. So there's lots of things that are involved. Yes, Commissioner Harwood.
Yeah, you're specifically talking about just the geometronic, the geo, the shape of the surface
Yep.
and all that.
Geometrically.
Not the structure of the template or anything like
Not the
that.
structure, not the right-of-way width.
Right.
There's nothing in the fire
Is there,
code.
But the
Handles
fire
that.
code does leave it up to the fire marshal or whoever's in charge as to what depth they think is appropriate to handle their equipment and trucks. That's where it gets weird hiring a professional engineer or anyone else to look at this, because they're going to need to talk to the respective fire district
Oh,
and
yeah.
say, based on my observations, I've seen X, Y, Z out in the field. Is this going to work for you?
Well,
That's going to add to the
Well,
cost.
I guess if your intent is to not only have the proper surface widths and turning radiuses and, like you say, a hammerhead or a full cul-de-sac at the end or whatever, if that's one of the issues, and if the other issue is the structural integrity of the road itself, then we need to make sure that,
Well, the fire code doesn't address that.
Okay,
They just
so-
say,
Except that it leaves it up to the fire
Yeah, they
marshal
just
to make
say-
a determination.
they say the surface has to be passable, basically, is the way it reads. So I don't even think they tell the fire marshals that they have to even look at
It
depth.
doesn't say, yeah,
It doesn't even tell them they
it
have
gives
to
them
look at it.
complete discretion to say whether they think this is sufficient for their fire authority.
Right.
but if you cite the IFC standards only, then I would think that we would want to expand the requirement then that the template of the road has the structural integrity to support the expected traffic or something to that
Well,
effect.
Commissioner Harwood, that's what we emailed y'all, a document that we've put together for professionals. And we've pulled from sources like the Federal Highway Administration,
Sure.
federal lands
Yeah.
even the Forest Service has their own
Right.
design standards for low-volume roads. And these are all low-volume roads because we as professionals see that the county has a gap at this point. They address common driveways, what a driveway consists of. Then you've got highway district standards. Actually, I don't think the county code actually tells us what kind of depth or structure has to be in a driveway. So there's nothing.
No, there's nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing in there until you get to highway district standards. Well, the highway districts own the roads that they own, correct? That's all they have purview over, right? That's our understanding.
Well, not exactly, but keep going. I'll
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
It's weird.
It's weird. I will agree with David. And there's nothing in county code that addresses how to build these private roads, common driveways, what kind of depth, structure, how can we safely get, emergency vehicles to and from. So there's a lot of different things to it. So the International Fire Code, we keep going back to that. Yes, we have to meet that for the minimum geometric requirements, but this is by no means a pavement design. So, does that help describe that? Commissioner
Yeah.
John? Okay.
Just to piggyback, so everyone's on the same playing field, there's all sorts of iterations of ownership and non-ownership by the highway districts. One example, they could have accepted, meaning when a plat goes through, gets recorded with the county, they may have accepted the road 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. They may or may not have maintained it. So we have roads out there that are public roads, but the highway district doesn't maintain it. Set that aside. We have roads in subdivisions that the highway district never accepted. They're private roads. Set that aside. We've got another dozen versions of those kinds of things. You have to look at each subdivision or parcels of land to figure out what's going on. So it's highly iterative depending on where and when these things were developed. And that's why there's no simple, easy solution.
But aren't we talking about when somebody wants to make a change here, not going back and trying to
always that.
straighten out all these other problems that you
Right,
have,
yeah.
yeah.
The pivot point is we're always dealing with someone wanting something new.
Okay, so if we're dealing with somebody that wants something new, then some of these issues where the highway district hasn't taken over maintenance when it's their road anyway, and those things wouldn't come into effect unless the new developer wanted to
Well,
do something in that
and
area.
except
Yeah.
that the highway district has to agree if they actually have the right of way, even if
Yeah.
they haven't been maintaining it.
Okay, yeah, I understand that, yeah. So that would be, you know,
Yeah, many of the roads we're talking about and discussing, especially with these minor subdivisions, the highway districts are never gonna take those over. The only thing that they have purview to review the plat is how it affects their actual highway district. The ingress and egress, the traffic loading coming onto it. That's what they're supposed to be looking at, correct, David?
Yes, but
Yes, but.
the highway districts would argue to the contrary on when you bring up the term never.
Right.
Depending on which highway district you talk about.
Yeah, we've got 4 different opinions, I think, in the county.
And that's part of the issue is that the highway districts get pressure from residents in these minor subdivisions after 4 or 5 years gone by saying, why don't you take over our road and maintain it? Well, you know the answer to that. It wasn't built to highway district standards and the highway district doesn't have the money.
I've been trying to get Shoshone County to take over State Highway 4 up in Burke Canyon for 20 years,
But
yeah.
nonetheless, the highway districts feel pressured, and so
Yeah.
that's one of the pressure points of this discussion. That's why the highway districts would prefer that most all these roads meet highway district standards.
But the burden of cost to do that, especially for all these minor subdivisions, you're talking about a roadway now that, I mean, it's
It never
double the
pencils out
cost.
on a
Yeah.
minor subdivision.
It's double the cost. Even
Right.
not a very large subdivision, you're talking about a lot of extra money upfront development cost.
That was what we had in 2016, where it required all subdivisions to be accessed by a road that met the highway district standards. And that was part of the reason that the board wanted to go away from that. And we've also had, Pat weigh in on this issue, that it's his opinion that we should not go back to that because the impacts are not roughly proportional to the actual cost of those improvements.
And
So-
that rough proportionality is a term that the courts have come up with. James can tell us all about that.
My question, practical one is, on the average road, is it a greater cost if you have to retroactively go back, generally speaking? I know you gotta be specific in any situation, but generally speaking, is it more costly to go back to bring it up to standards, highway district standards, or to initially build it pursuant to highway district standards?
Well, that's, it changes by every situation. I mean, I could show you roads that it's gonna cost you more to improve it than it would have been to build it right the first time. So, but I can also show you the inverse of that. That one's a very hard one to answer, Commissioner.
Well,
It's all over the map.
yeah,
And lots of times, we've got a right-of-way issue in here, because the county code does not tell you how much right-of-way you need when you do a common driveway versus a private road. There's nothing in the code right now that's saying we need 65 feet of right of way, 45 feet of right of way. You know, there's plenty of right of ways out there that are 15 feet. So you're gonna find those in,
Well, we do have standards for widths of easements for these things, but that's only for areas within the subject plat.
Right.
We can't require an additional easement outside of the subdivision, so we are limited in that way.
So it seems to me, going back to our original problem, is that currently, as it stands, people are building roads that are dangerous for the fire department or emergency vehicles to come through, right? That's our problem, correct?
That's one of the problems.
Okay,
But keep
but
going.
that seems to be a problem that we're trying to solve.
Right.
Right. So it seems that also that the fire code won't sufficiently cover that by what the gentleman at the, sorry, I don't remember. Stewart is talking about. So it seems like what we need to do then, to just keep things moving forward, because yes, it is complicated, and no, we're not going to make everybody happy, we're not going to have a perfect solution, but if we can have a good solution, then at least we're moving forward, is to find a code that solves that problem and also satisfies the fire department and keeps their people safe and keeps the community safe by being able to continue to provide them that service, correct? All right, so can we move towards that? What would that look like?
So so we have essentially three options when we're talking about roads serving minor subdivisions, because I want to make the distinction, because if it's a major subdivision, the code requires a highway district standard road. So that's just kind of putting those aside. So we're really focusing on minor subdivisions here right now. The options, or one, we go back to 2016, which has already been recommended by Pat that we don't do that. And nor is there probably much support from our board to do that. We go with what we currently have and try and improve what we currently have as being International Fire Code. So that's kind of like the two sides of the spectrum, I would say. And then maybe there's something in the middle, which is a third option, which is more robust than the International Fire Code, but not quite to the standards of the highway district standards.
And Stuart, do you think you and your group could come up with something like that to
yes, ma'am,
to present to us?
You have
They-
an email.
we emailed y'all a copy
Yeah,
of
I'm
it.
sorry,
And I didn't bring enough copies for everybody, I
Okay,
apologize.
I
But
don't remember seeing it, but thank you.
I'm thinking we
So-
should schedule that as a workshop item just for that.
Okay,
yes, ma'am, we do have a solution that we believe is in between highway district standards and, you know, just the International Fire Code. Because we look at, you know, we see lots of times you get one minor subdivision, then you've got a through to another minor subdivision, and a through to another minor subdivision. That's one private road feeding all these now. So how are we gonna make sure that this thing's gonna handle the traffic, stay safe, and how do we put a maintenance agreement in place?
so why can't we just apply that to this situation? Why does that have to be a separate workshop?
Well, we're not prepared, the staff's not prepared to have a dialogue on this.
Okay, but you've looked at it?
I've glossed over it, I haven't
Uh-huh.
read it and thought about it. To my knowledge, no one on the staff has really drilled down on it either.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is, because we seem to be retreading territory, you know, every meeting, is, you know, let's get to that solution, let's apply it, and then we can move on.
Well, I think the first thing we would need to get to is whether or not we believe that's the right option.
Okay,
I mean, if that's what the commission feels, that yes, we've understand what the proposal is about what we're talking about. We feel that the International Fire Code is inadequate, then we want to go this other route. That's what we first need to determine, rather than saying, okay, let's just propose this idea.
Right.
First, you need to come, I think, in my opinion, you need to come to the realization that International Fire Code is substandard.
and it
If you
seems like.
believe that.
Yeah, it seems like we're all in agreement with that. Am I wrong?
yeah, when you say the right option, you mean or choose the option, you're talking here about the option of something between highway district standard and international fire standard.
Right,
Correct, yeah.
So then we need to determine what that is.
right.
Stuart, is it too much or too lengthy for me to ask you to just summarize for us what you come up with?
Sure, yeah, we've kind of come up with, we went ahead and put it into code language to try to help the staff out. We've come up with
What does
what
it
we
look like?
consider different
Yeah, I don't-
versions of private roads. So what a high volume private road, low volume, we go in and define those. And then we also lay out in there what the minimum requirements are, surfacing, depths of the pavement structure, those kind of things. These are all minimums, and they go back to the federal highway standards for low-volume roads. So that's what this is all tied back to.
Your suggestion there is that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
No, we've got a whole table in here that gives you, it's kind of a carte blanche. You can pick what basically, we assume as engineers, typically, there's 10 trips per day per house. So we start looking at the number of trips. These number of trips induce damage to the pavement over time. So we look at these, we consider them, they're called easels for the engineers, but it's the number of trips basically is what you're looking at, and how much damage is induced to the road. Well, you design based off those number of trips, how thick the pavement needs to be, what kind of surface it can be. Lots of these roads can be an aggregate surface, but they have to be maintained every couple of years. Some roads are going to have enough volume that they need to be paved with asphalt. But do they need curb and gutter like highway standards? Maybe not. We've got several different options in here to choose from. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, it'd sort of be an à la carte for the builder.
Well, the
To
design
go-
professional, the design
Right.
professional will look at.
So you check your boxes and that leads you to,
Well-
which one you need.
Yeah, they can always design something greater than these. These are the minimum requirements. So this gives something for the staff to look at without needing an engineer review to say, okay, they met these minimum standards here and check. Now, I don't need another PE to look over it to check that the design is appropriate. So that, that's kind of what we've tried to build into this.
Have you run that by the highway district or the fire districts to have their input on this?
We've gone to the fire districts. Fire districts have come to meet with us. The highway districts we haven't gone to them yet. We felt the county was the place to come to first because we see this as, it doesn't affect the highway districts because they only are worried about their roads and maintaining them. What we're focusing on here are roads outside the fire district that are within county purview, so we came to the county first.
But you did go to the fire districts.
Yes, we did.
What was your input from them?
They gave us a lot of good input. They supported this. We can get them back in here and ask them, themselves, but we felt like we had a lot of good support from them.
How many did you go to?
Two, Northern Lakes and Kootenai County. They're the two biggest. Everything else is volunteer, basically. So they're the only two that have full-time people that look at just this kind of stuff.
Stuart?
How does the proposal deal with changing over time of, like, for example, you're talking about minor subdivision next to minor subdivision. Now, we have serial ones, but then we have genuine ones. Someone creates a minor subdivision, somebody else, mom and pop come along and create another one next to it, and then you end up with 4 or 5. Does it deal with this transition over time of road use?
Yes, because we built some language in here that the director has the ability to say, no, we see future development past this. You cannot only meet this really low volume road standard, we want you to go ahead and build to this higher standard. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
It's, every community does that. You go to Post Falls right now, the way they're, you're building a throughout to bare land that they know is gonna get developed someday.
Right.
So that's what they're looking at. So that's what, that language needs to be built in here as well, because say you've got Hoodoo Ranch, which y'all have all seen the example of. Hoodoo Ranch is a perfect one that they could have, said, we see future development in here. We want this road at a higher standard here. Correct?
That's essentially this
Pull it
one
up.
right here.
There it is right there.
Yeah. That's the one that needs a through road that does not have one yet.
So-
Where on the?
So this right here this internal, so you can see, this is the one, remember, where we had
That's the example that they sent us.
a number of, this is serial miners
Right.
on the perimeter of these public roads, and then the interior was left over. Initially, they had proposed a major subdivision for this entire thing, but the highway district was going to require some major road improvements for that, and they said, well, we're going to look at other options, and they did this route. But then they, of course, when these subdivisions came through, they recognized that their goal is to eventually subdivide the interior parcel, and so they knew that they were going to need to provide access to that part. But that's where they built these
And
two
if I got it
legs.
right, they did the minor subdivisions, serial minor subdivisions, like the horseshoe around that,
Yeah.
because they were on highway district roads, and the highway district is obligated to give you access through a driveway. So they're able to circumvent the requirement to create adequate roadway.
Right.
They just took it from the highway district.
Yeah. Stuart, I don't remember, and you have to refresh me. Are these road standards for major subdivisions and minors, or just minors?
They could apply to major subdivisions if they're private roads. We've got some high volume standards in there. So we've set it up to where it can work for both.
So it seems like that the problem that we're talking about now, the requirement for applicants would need, if we're going to change that to be beyond the IFC standards, would need to consider Stuart's email. And I'm sorry, I don't think I got it. So if,
You didn't, I'm sending it to you right now.
thank you.
I'm sorry, there was two commissioners I couldn't find the email address for. They weren't listed on the site, and I was trying to use whatever was on the
Okay.
website to be through official channels.
Trying to keep us in the dark, is that what you're saying?
I think we have two things. I think in the county requirements, you'd have the basic language that says it'll meet the fire road standards plus maybe these private road standards or something to that effect. And then the private road standards would be somehow attached to or part of the county code requirements. And wouldn't that be, I mean, instead of putting all of this into the code, you could attach whatever you and us and the county commissioners agree to the code as a kind of like
An appendix,
or a design manual, or whatever
or
you want
something
to
that
call
we
it.
could update
Yeah.
without having to update the code.
Because I think what one of the things I just scanned it, I just saw it for the first time, it looks to me like you guys attempted to come up with private road standards for wherever you build a private road.
Yes, sir, that's what we're
Yes.
looking at.
Yeah, so that's good, I think, because then you have a standard for private roads. But then in the county code, we'd have to say it'd be the fire requirements plus the adopted
Additional
county
design
requirements,
guidelines or whatever you call it.
adopted county requirements for private roads. And you could just do it like that, and this would be, I don't know how you would attach that to your.
Yeah, I think we just do it by resolution for the commissioners as an attachment to the code.
Yeah.
Like we do for fees. Every couple of years, we update our fees by resolution. So if we kept it as a standalone document outside of the code, it'd be a lot easier to update.
Well, not only that, but then you could use it and you could reference it in your major subdivision requirements as well. So we got one set of specifications for private roads for whatever kind of a subdivision you're trying to develop. And then you just reference them in the county code as to, you go to that document to get the requirements.
So what would it take, because you guys have to look it over, when should we get back together and hammer this thing down?
Well, I think, before getting that far, I think it is worth kind of pointing out how this was initially introduced was focusing on existing private roads that are serving minor subdivisions. What we are now talking about is changing the road standards for all subdivisions, which is much larger than what we initially had started.
But my understanding is that when we change code or whatever, that it's from that date forward.
True.
you know, whatever's behind there is as it is, it was legal, you know, whether they
Right.
kind of cheated or not, it's legal, so we don't have to do.
I think that we should definitely review the document, and I did look, and you two were the only ones that did not receive a copy of this, so I forwarded you an email, so if you do have
Thank you.
something where you can
Yeah, I
read your
did- I
emails,
did get it.
you do have that.
I don't,
I do think
go ahead.
that, that just like we have what we say, they have to they have to meet IFC standards, you know, they have to meet state highway standards, we can have this private road standard, but I still think we should stick to our minor subdivisions with this. We can talk about this new private road standard, but I think that our goal was minor subdivisions, yes?
Yeah, that was the problem we were
that's-
trying to solve.
And
Yeah.
so, but we still need to look at this road standard because that's part of our problem with minor subdivisions. They have really crappy infrastructure and then they want to actually stack them side by side and create a major subdivision with really crappy roads
Yeah.
and crappy infrastructure. And this will at least make it better for minor subdivisions. And then, of course, the next problem will be then major subdivisions with the new road standard that they'll ask for, which is to be expected. But I hope that we can keep this road, I like the road standard upgrade because it also makes the road easier to maintain for the residents. Because part of the problem for our International Fire Code road, they have no maintenance schedule and they really have no foundational requirements.
Right.
And I think that as members of this commission, that's kind of like a revelation that doesn't make sense to us.
Right. And-
Because we're used to places that have decent roads and stuff like that, but there are lots of places with really poor roads. And getting a community to agree to upgrade their roads and stuff like that is very difficult. And even to upgrade services to their area is very difficult. But sometimes we have to help them out by doing the difficult thing.
Yes, ma'am, to give you an idea, you know, was it 10 years ago, David, when they finally closed the loophole for logging roads? It was somewhere around there.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah. Before we even had county code, there was something in state code that you could build logging roads and then just roll them into a subdivision. So they were circumventing the entire process at that point, you know, many years ago. So we've moved past that and we're moving forward. So we hope that, you know, we see this document as helping provide these guys in the county, the staff and everybody else up front. These are the clear rules. We got to follow these rules. Here we go. We think this helps fix a lot of your minor subdivision problem without even having to change the definition of your minor subdivision right now, going from 4 to 2. We think this could actually fix that. So there, you know, that's our group's perspective. I'm sure y'all need to debate that and talk about that, but that's one of the reasons we started looking at this. And we focused on roads and saw that as
Yeah, I think,
a
I agree.
potential solution.
I agree with you. I think that we're not considering major subdivision right now. Just because we want to adopt these for the minor subdivision doesn't mean that it's going to automatically get it rolled into the major
I don't know that
subdivision.
it even can.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
highway districts are gonna argue, it's
Yeah.
not our purview.
Yeah.
Because if it's a major subdivision, it's their purview.
Yeah, so I don't think we want to confuse the issue by saying we can't deal with these with the minor subdivisions if we don't automatically also deal with the major at the same time. We're not trying to do that, but this, I mean, having these standards as a standalone like this, not only that, but that if there's a need to change these for whatever reason, and it's just, the commissioners can do it without going through a whole.
Yeah, I think we should look at trying to keep it a separate document
Yeah, I
outside
mean,
the code, just to make it more flexible. But we could, if we have to, we can embed it into the code.
So,
Yeah, on that point, just, I want to acknowledge, the two good ideas. Because, one, it's the don't do what you don't have to yet idea, and I think that's right. We see, and you're able to see how this plays out with the minor subdivisions before you apply it to something more. And in statutory construction, it's most common in this situation, as you can see with the reference to the International Fire Code or the reference to the building code, that gets updated periodically as new techniques come forward and so forth, to have an external document. So I'd be very much in favor of that, because that's the practical way to, in a statutory drafting way to do this, to make it flexible. I do have a suggestion now, and some people may cringe at this, but I think it's important. I think it would be important to run this by the highway districts for a couple of reasons. One is, this is their bailiwick. This is what they do every day. They know what they're talking about when it comes to roads. Not that you guys don't, but they do too. And it'd be good to get their input. It'd be, number two, it'd probably be politically good to get their buy-in. It'd be helpful if they bought into this. And three, as has just been pointed, they do have an interest in it because they end up having to take over or being asked to take over some of these minor subdivision roads. So if I were a highway district, I think I would be a little put off that I wasn't allowed to have some say over this. So, and not that we can always sing kumbaya, but sometimes we can. Maybe we can get them on board. But and it may slow us down a little, but I think it's worth running it by.
Well, and just so you know, I sent all 4 highway supers your draft. So they've had it now at this point for over a month.
We've been talking to them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
individually, there's some that we can approach and some we know we're not going to get the support. So,
What you could do there is give them a deadline to comment. So if they don't comment, that's their problem. But give them a deadline to comment.
And at this point, what we have done is said, look, we would like to discuss this with you,
Right.
but we haven't heard back from anybody.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
But yeah, if they're not interested, that's fine. I'm
They are. They're just like us. They've got a full plate. It's hard to carve out time to deal with just this.
but yeah, I think if you give them a deadline, you've given them the opportunity. Does that work for you guys? Is that?
In terms of,
Are we finding a good solution that will solve the problem that you have brought forward?
are
Okay,
you
so,
asking us if Stuart Malley's proposal meets our,
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know yet. We haven't had the time to digest it.
But I mean, if it does work, are we heading in the right direction?
here's what I would probably say, and this is maybe something that Stuart could chime in on, is that if you are talking about applying these standards to minor subdivisions that, are served by existing private roads, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm guessing that's not what their intent was when they designed this overall document. It wasn't for just minor subdivisions. So there's going to be a lot more, there's going to be higher intensity roads that's involved here that is never intended to be used, I guess, for minor subdivisions. So,
yeah, I mean, we look at it as design professionals. We are going to go through the entire gamut and look at it. And, there's a lot of major subdivision roads that are private roads that the highway districts, it's not part of their plan to take them over. They're never going to take them over. So to me, we feel like these alternatives may even help the major subdivisions down the road. And I understand that's not part of this discussion, but we went ahead and drafted the document like that. So yes, Ben, you are correct.
confused. You're saying there's major subdivision roads that are not subject to highway district jurisdiction?
Yes, the highway district will, they
Yeah,
have,
we've got
absolutely, they will not take them over.
From the 60s.
Yeah.
That predate code.
but it's important to make the distinction, though, that the roads were built to their standards, but they are not willing to accept them or
Well,
maintain them, and they're
sometimes.
privately maintained. These are for subdivisions, yeah.
Hold on, but this is, what we're talking about is standards that would be applied proactive, going forward, not retroactive, right?
Correct,
Right.
So it wouldn't affect those,
right.
would it, unless they substantially change it, or?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, depends on what kind of development occurs within that subdivision, or if there are further subdivision on those lots, or, additional uses on those lots that may apply.
I think part of what we should include in how we do it, it may be there needs to be some trigger at some point if you're gonna revamp a road or add more residents, or whatever, that you have to bring it up to standards. I mean, that's a proactive legislation. There's this whole issue about retroactive in the law and going forward and going backward. Going backward, you risk constitutional issues of taking and all that stuff. But there's a point where if they're substantially changing it going forward, they need to comply with the new standard. But what you're telling me, let's assume that we did that, then we would have some major subdivisions that would have to comport with these standards if they revamped them.
Currently, the code says they have to meet highway district standards. So any major subdivision has to meet that.
So
Whether they're out on an island by themselves and you got a private two-lane road feeding them, now all of a sudden they've got to have this larger road, which there are instances of that out there. So, yeah, we're talking about that.
So it's a non-problem. They got to bring it to highway district standards anyway.
Whether or not it's accepted by the highway district, or
Currently.
maintained by the highway district, right.
Even if
The
it,
point is, this is a bit overkill because it deals with far more than just what we would see in minor subdivision.
Yeah, that's my only point, is that if we're getting the direction, say, let's just move forward with this proposal, what I'm saying is that the proposal is not.
It's not just for minor.
It's not just for minor subdivisions, it's
You
far more
always
reaching than
have
that.
someone ready to charge forward. I mean, that's that.
Well, this
I
proposal
would say that.
specifically says it's for private roads, so it wouldn't be for the highway district roads. It wouldn't apply to highway district roads. Now, you may be correct that some of the requirements in here, of course, it would depend upon which set of requirements we were requiring each individual developer to do, as far as the private roads are concerned. But it's evident to me that the IFC standards are not, if it doesn't deal with the structural integrity of the road
And that's
or
the
the
problem.
maintainability of the road, adopting the IFC standards is a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. So really, it's just, maybe you could get the fire truck turned around in there, but it may be stuck clear to its axles, So, so the point is that we need to have a road that accommodates the type of vehicle that's going to be using the road from a radius and all that kind of standpoint. But we also need requirements that require a structural integrity for those roads of some kind.
So Stuart, based on this conversation, is there anything you would change in this current document to make sure it was only minor subdivisions?
well, we could go back and look at it. We went ahead and put in here the definition of a public road, what the definition is, and, we referenced the highway district standards, that any public road has to meet highway district standards. We put a high-volume private road. We have a large lot private road, because we have instances of developments like these within the county. So that's why we addressed them. We have low-volume roads. And we go through and specify what kind of surfacing needs to be, the, minimum width of the pavement structure, the right-of-way width. We went ahead and addressed all this and tried to look at these kind of things.
So if he did that and he made whatever, to make sure it was just minor subdivision and sent that to you, and then you had time to look at it, would that
Yes.
solve the problem?
I hope. I need to look at it before I can answer the
Sure,
question.
sure, right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
but we're
yes,
heading
that's
in the right
track.
direction.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think if that were to be the case, when you propose a solution, you have to look at how this affects, the development in all
Absolutely, yeah.
regards. And so I think, again, it would be important to look and see how, if we apply a standard like that for minor subdivisions, is that where we want to go? Because there's certainly the potential where there may be international fire code roads out there, and they are adequate roads. But if a different standard is applied, could be talking about tens of thousands of dollars extra for a two-lot minor subdivision. So we have to look on how that's going to apply to development all across the board. But I certainly believe that is a step in public health and safety in the right direction. I think it's, in my personal opinion, better than having an international fire code. But that's I think.
Would take it right that you're only hesitant here to too, because you just haven't had time.
Right, exactly.
There's nothing else out there that we're not hearing that you're worried about, is it?
Right, not that I know of.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we agree that the IFC standards are, on their own, are not adequate, and that we need to come up with some type of a document that would address the structural integrity of the road and the maintainability of the road, and the fact that the road was designed to accommodate the expected traffic, and that we're not at that point completely yet, but so the motion would be that we need to be in between the the full-blown highway district road and an IFC requirement, and we need to have something else to rely upon for the purpose of the structural integrity and maintainability of the private roads in these minor subdivisions. That's my motion.
You don't actually need a motion. We could work from consensus if that's
Okay.
where you are as a
All
board.
right, whatever.
But if you wanted to take a motion in a second.
I don't
you
care.
can.
But I want us to move on with this.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want us to move on with this,
Sure.
Yeah.
So my question would be, how is this, when you have fire district rooms, the fire district is supposedly going out there and saying, yes, sir,
Or no.
or no. When you have a highway district, the highway district is saying, yes, sir, or no.
This puts us in the middle.
And
Us, the
and how
staff.
do we take care
I
of that?
don't know. I haven't gotten there yet.
That's part of the,
That's part of the issue.
when you make a proposal of some kind, it does lead to other things that we have to consider, including that very
Right.
issue.
Yeah, so
And that's
We-
a big issue.
We address that by requiring a design professional to be involved.
Right, and you already have that here, analysis provided by an engineer, just specifying type of engineer, certification, whatever. We talked about that earlier. And then the follow-up, adding the follow-up, that you prove that what was approved has been done.
Yes, ma'am, we call those as-built out there. We have to come through and do as-built on all commercial projects, those kind of things. If anything was changed from our plans from the beginning of the project, because, there's
That's
always
often
something
the
gonna
case.
change, we have to go back and document it at the end and stamp that and turn that over to the county.
I haven't had a chance to, review this yet. I haven't even seen it, but do you have a requirement here for some kind of final inspections or something of the facility?
we do.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at it, but we discussed that, amongst ourselves earlier, that we needed not only some type of design requirements for the facility, but we also needed some type of a professional inspection of the work to make sure it was in fact constructed in accordance with what was approved of in the original approval of the subdivision. So you need both design and
do,
construction.
and ideally, the engineer or design professional needs to be on site at certain critical moments while the road's being built.
Well, that's true too, yeah. But-
Otherwise, you have no real knowledge that it's been
Well,
done
the thing
right.
about it is, if you got an engineer that certifies the as-bills, they're sticking their neck out if they haven't been out there to watch some of the work, in fact, because it's pretty hard to certify construction on a project without ever having been out there to take a look at it when it was being constructed.
If we don't have our professional licenses, we can't practice, so that's,
Right.
it's kind of like an
So-
attorney.
So, Stuart, how much do you need to review your document, to make any changes, to present it to the fellows here?
I'd actually like to sit down with them individually and let them go through it, and then let's talk about it before we bring the document back to y'all
Okay.
to
So-
get us further along rather than us,
Right, back and forth. Great,
We'd
yeah.
like to work with county staff to modify this document now to meet just minor subdivisions. That way, when we come back to you, we've got something. So, David, how quick, a month,
Yeah,
2 months?
We can squeeze it in a month.
Okay.
Want me to be presumptuous and say that I would volunteer to help you if you want my help. If you don't want it, fine, but that's,
I'll take you up on that. That'd be helpful.
because
Yeah, with
You
your
know.
background.
You know, I've got 20, 30 years of road construction experience.
Yes, sir. Thank
Yeah.
you for the help.
Excellent.
Okay, Ben, do you want to go on with next problems or?
Well, I'm wondering how fruitful that would be if we're looking at this option of going beyond International Fire Code, because a lot of the problems that are raised revolve around the application of International Fire Code.
I still think it would be fruitful for them to know what we've
Sure.
been talking about and how maybe the road change will make everything simpler or more complicated.
Yeah,
What
okay.
you've been working on.
Good point. Okay. So the second problem is, and we had Chief Gerald Archer from Kootenai Fire and Rescue to provide some context here for us in this subject. But as you'll see here, the International Fire Code standard requires secondary means of emergency access when it provides access to 31 or more dwelling units.
I have a question.
Mhm.
How did the number 31 get established?
It's in the
Why
code.
31?
Fire code.
Fire code.
It's fire
Okay.
code.
Yeah, International Fire Code.
Okay.
So then it says again, however, if the road serves 31 or more lots or parcels, the fire district does not have the authority to require secondary means of access, only when there's 31 dwelling units or more. So I want to make that distinction and please, if you have any questions, this would be a
That
good
gets a
time.
little tricky, because we have a lot of parcels out there that are undeveloped.
Mhm.
But we're talking about talking about minor subdivisions. They wouldn't have 31 or 30 properties.
Oh,
in
yeah,
them.
we got
Well,
lots.
Minor ones?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the
hold on.
problem with serial minors. You can get 50 or 60, and they're all
Yeah.
lined up.
Let's
Yeah,
take a-
but that's because you got a process where you can do
You can actually.
20 acres, 20 acres, 20
Here's a-
acres,
Here's a
20
good
acres.
example
No,
on the screen.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that if you put a stop to that kind of behavior, then your minor subdivisions only would deal with how many acres?
So a
Four
minor
properties.
subdivision is 4 or fewer. That is a minor subdivision.
Okay,
What we're talking about is not necessarily serial minors, but there are existing private roads out there that provide access to a number of parcels.
oh, yeah.
40, 50 parcels.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So, I mean, if you take this example, and if you just extend it to where this provides access to, 29 lots or parcels. Let's say that this private road coming off this public road here provides access to 29 parcels. And this is a scenario that has happened, and Chief
Yeah.
Archer
Right.
addressed this, is where they came in, being served by 29 lots or parcels as a private road, came in with a 4-lot minor subdivision. The fire district said, you know what, we have some problems here because we think this road has already surpassed the number of dwelling units of 31. They said, we cannot support a 4-lot minor subdivision without a secondary means of access. And so we were able to work with the fire district. They came to the conclusion that they could support a 2-lot minor subdivision because that would be at the 30th,
It was right on 30.
right on 30. And so that way they were able to go forward with that particular subdivision. But the problem here really is the fire district has problems identifying how many dwelling units there actually are, because, like David was mentioning, not all of the lots that are created are built yet. And so the fire district's kind of stuck. They may say, you know what, it's true that this particular private road provides access to 40 parcels, but it only has 10 dwelling units on it. And so by the International Fire Code, they would say, we don't have the authority to require secondary means of access because the International Fire Code only says if you exceed 30 dwelling units, and there's only 10. So the fire district says, we have no authority. Unfortunately, go ahead and go forward, even though they know at some point those will be developed with dwelling units. And then it just so happens that the poor fellow who builds the 31st house is going to say, well, we can't sign off on your building permit because you need a secondary means of access. Well, that is maybe not even possible for that person to build. And so what we're talking about is maybe we should have this addressed more proactively and have a developer demonstrate compliance with that standard of the International Fire Code before we do subdivisions, before we create additional density that may perpetuate this issue. And so what we had talked about, and consistent with our major subdivision standards, is that if you are proposing proposing 25 lots or more, then you, at that point, design your infrastructure so that you provide a secondary means of access. So how that would apply to the minor subdivision is that the applicant would demonstrate that they are, and here's the solution down here you'll see, require the applicant to provide secondary means of access if the existing road serves 25 lots or parcels or more, unless otherwise approved by the fire district with jurisdiction.
And the key term there is parcels.
Yeah.
Not existing residences, but parcels.
That's right, yeah, and that's the difficulty that the fire district has, and they're very much in support of this proposal. So,
And that means if you have, the guy comes along at the end with respect to parcels, and he adds the parcel that takes them up to 25, then they gotta find a secondary.
That's right.
access.
Exactly.
So you still have that somewhat, the guy who comes last gets hurt most problem, but it's not as much a problem because these aren't built on, it's not dwellings. Is that
Right.
and they're proposing additional density with a subdivision proposal. And so what we're hoping to do is have that person figure that issue out rather than, the poor guy who has decided not to yet build and then now stuck with figuring the issue out.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
How does this relate, if at all, to what you're doing?
I mean, this deals with the fire code, and they're pretty specific. They consider dwelling units, so they look at every parcel as having 2 dwelling units, technically, is how they're supposed to look at it. It does not, I don't think it'll change.
You don't deal with ingress, how many you have to have?
No, I don't think it
It's
does.
something we still have to.
Yes.
In the code, you don't need to put it right.
Yeah, yes.
And one of the
I'd vote
big
for it.
issues that we're facing is that with housing shortage, there's encouraging to put second residences on parcels. And if that were not to, the people who are encouraging that are not looking at this problem when
Right.
they're encouraging it.
The ADUs.
Right.
Case in point, my wife and I just built a secondary dwelling on our farm, and though we're on a main road, so it's not a problem. But yeah, and it's not only because there's lack of, there's need for. I mean, we're doing it because we can do a VRBO thing. We can rent it out, and that's another reason why you'd build a secondary dwelling.
So this solution here would be rolled into the code itself, then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I do have a question. When I made that motion, did you second it? You didn't vote on it.
We can.
You can.
Well, I mean, either that or
You should,
I'll
since it's
retract
a
my
motion,
motion if you
second.
want to, but I mean, whatever, but I mean,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So how many, we had 3?
3.
You're,
I'm abstaining.
okay. So I guess.
Well, the motion passed.
Although I really want to know why the nay. So I want to
Well,
hear.
technically, after you do it and have a second, you are supposed to have a discussion.
Yeah.
To lead into that. I think the name was, I don't want to zero it down so much that it does limit things. I think even though the IFC is probably not up to code, there's ways we can make that work. But it probably is appropriate in some certain areas. And to just scratch it all together and find something in the middle may or may not actually be the right choice. We're getting rid of,
It seems like Stewart has covered that, though.
Yes, ma'am, we still will have to meet the International Fire Code
Oh,
with
yeah.
any development. That's, I mean, that's,
the motion was to not, was to.
No, no, my motion was to take the IFC and enhance it with structural requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, not just the surface, the turning radiuses and all that, which is in the IFC.
Right.
But to enhance it with some type of a private road structural and then maintenance.
yes, ma'am, they're two separate things. You'll have IFC, which will be in place, and then you would have a private road standard. And the two are not, they're not necessarily tied together, but you have to meet this one, and you also have to meet this one, is the way it would work.
And that one, you look at the specifics, and you have that grid.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not just like A and B, it's A and B or C or D.
And I'd have to look at that a little bit more, but I think part of our issues is that the road infrastructure is also seriously connected to the serial minor subdivision. And so are we opening Pandora's box and allowing more choices that builders can do with roads instead of, bringing it down? Well, I need to read through it and look through that and make sure, but I think it's something we do need to consider because that's one of the reasons that we're here right now is what happened in 2016 and removing some things. And now we have the serial minor subdivision problem and roads and infrastructure and all that are a serious component of that. So looking through it, I want to make sure that we're not opening or causing even a whole plethora of problems by giving more and more and more choices, because like Lee has talked about before, which I understand builders are building and they want to make a profit, are they going to always go down to the minimal, again, requirement that they have to do? And go, yeah, it's all in there, but again, long-term, are we
My
going to be right back here in the same thing?
My understanding, though, is that it's not the developer's choice. It is the engineer who looks at it and says, this is what you need based on these standards.
But
It's,
are they
so-
forced to comply? I mean, that's what I have to look
yeah,
at
they
it.
would need to, yeah.
Who has to sign off on it? Is it just a recommendation or is there an actual, they have to agree to this? Reading through all of that, and I haven't had an opportunity to read through it either, so a lot of this is just conjecture.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my
If I put
intent-
my stamp on a set of plans and tell them to build a road section in this geometric layout, this thickness with these materials, I have to sign off on it that it was done. They have complied with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
That's
and
part of the
my
discussion.
intent here was to have the IFC as the base, the foundation for these roads, and then add whatever's needed with the various options to make it better from a structural and a road maintenance standpoint, not just throw the fire code out. No, I never do that. Well,
And that's for
Wouldn't have
public
that as a
safety.
choice anyway.
yeah, well, there's no choice on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta do
State
that.
adopts the
so,
fire code.
Yeah, so, but it's this enhancement to make sure that the truck doesn't get stuck. Yeah.
Or
Okay.
damaged.
Public
But-
safety.
The point is well taken that, and we always need to keep this on our mind, that we don't want to create unintended consequences. We think we're doing something that's good, turns out we create an unintended problem, and I think that's one of the things right, that's why you're hesitating partly, because you're gonna have to look at this. And so,
Right.
we don't-
I think the motion was just, that if I'm not mistaken, was just to have you submit these and talk to them.
Consider it.
It wasn't to adopt this.
No.
Right?
Okay.
It was simply
That's fine.
to have them talk together and
Take another run at it.
take another run at it.
Yeah, but I think it's worthwhile for your consideration in the future is that you're doing this cost benefit analysis, right? Like, what is the benefit that we're doing based on the cost that's deferred to the property owner?
Well, I've done cost benefits for 60 years, and there's no way that the benefit to the private party that wants to develop something the cheapest as possible is going to not be overridden by the benefit to the general public. It's just, the opportunity, what's the value of a life if the ambulance gets stuck because you can't get down the road and stuff like that? See, the whole thing that I think we're dealing with here is that there are certain people who want to subdivide just as cheap as humanly possible. And because of that, we've ended up with a lot of real problems. And we either have to make a decision to deal with these issues or just roll over and let the developers do whatever they please. And I'm not prepared to do that anymore. I think that I've spent practically a lifetime cleaning up messes that people made in the environment, that cost horrible and hundreds of billion. I mean,
Yeah.
if we had to dredge Coeur d'Alene Lake, it cost $3.5 billion. So, I mean, who's responsible for that, paying that bill? See, so I think the point is that we need to be understanding of the effects on people who want to develop their property. But the idea that we're going to come up with something where there's no impact on them from a cost standpoint or very little is just not going to happen if we want to do anything at all.
What legality does the county have to, for that example of an ambulance getting stuck or a fire truck not actually getting to a call?
None. We're not liable as long as we're doing what the code requires.
It's not a liability thing, and we always look at liability because we're such a legalistic society, but it's the fact that if the fire truck can't get down the private road to put the fire out in someone's $1.2 million house out on the Rathdrum Prairie, then there's a $1.2 million cost.
Well, it could lead to liability in the sense.
Well, it
that
could too, of
you
course,
could-
but yeah.
You could have
Yeah.
arguments over, did they appropriately try to get down the neighbors in their approach? That would be pretty rare. Is the road maintenance, well, the people responsible for maintenance and upkeep of the road, maybe they're the ones who are the culprits here.
Yeah.
So it can create, just to be honest, it can create various forms of liability. But I think the point to be made there, and the point I think you're all getting at is, again, this concept of external costs that, I always like to talk about liability is in the sense that we don't want liability because we want to take care of our fellow citizens. And if you take care of your fellow citizens and you do things reasonably and do them right, you don't have to worry about liability. We shouldn't be worried about getting sued all the time. What we should be worried about is doing things appropriately and in a good way for our fellow citizens. And if we do that, liability is not even an issue. And that's the point here, is if you have adequate roads, we won't have these problems.
Right.
So anyway, that's,
So going back to problem 2 and its solution, does that seem reasonable to everybody? Is that something we could vote on? Do we need more discussion?
I think we.
are we at a point for a vote? Are we at a point for a vote?
I think that we did that last year. I think this was.
Yeah, I think this is kind of where the conclusion of our last discussions came to, but, certainly if there are
This
reasons.
is an update for you newbies, it didn't hear last year's conversation.
Yeah. So we're going,
Was.
The then
as
plan
written here,
commissioners.
The then planning commission voted on putting that in there.
Fine.
If you have more, different suggestions.
It seems reasonable, and it seems like a good idea.
So the major difference is from dwelling units to parcels in 31 to 25.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And that deals with the issue of having a whole bunch of undeveloped parcels at the end.
Yeah.
Because if the fire code is stuck with actually occupied parcels, then those guys, their hands are tied.
Right.
Yeah, boy,
Right.
And yes, it does very much put the fire districts in a difficult spot. If
They
they're,
are then preventing subdivision.
or somebody else's house to be built.
Right.
And that can be hard
Tricky.
for them to do.
And Ben, you said you did talk to the fire districts and they
Mhm.
like that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so this, problem number 3 is resulting in a contradiction in our code and the application of it. It's a little bit complicated, as most of these things are. So hopefully I can explain this well enough. But there is a section, and I've referenced to the sections both here 86707 A1B and A2C. And I've also laid out the text of those two sections here below. But the synopsis is that there's a contradiction between, and I've highlighted that, roads in minor subdivisions, so actually roads that travel within the boundaries fully within that subdivision, or roads providing access to a minor subdivision via an existing private road. And I provided some standards or some examples here to illustrate it, but I wanted to go through this kind of as well. So, and I should probably not go so quickly here and read this as well. So A1B, it says roads in minor subdivisions or condominiums which provide legal and physical access to 5 or more parcels shall comply with the standards. And the standards
That's
being...
the highway district standard.
Yes,
Oh, the highway district, that's the highway district?
Uh-huh.
that's the highway
That's
district.
when it's-
It just says
That's-
standards now, this is
That's
existing.
because it's defined in the code as highway
Okay,
district
okay,
standard.
all right.
Yes.
That's why I interjected.
Okay, it's a definition.
Yes.
All right.
So this is, again, roads in minor subdivisions, so roads that travel within the minor subdivision, if it provides access to 5 or more parcels, and this could be up leading to it, it could be, beyond and beyond, and inclusive of the proposal, all of that, if it exceeds 5 or more, then it must comply with the standards, the highway district standards. Such roads may be dedicated as public roads to the highway district with jurisdiction. Otherwise, the director shall verify that those roads comply with the standards, and those roads shall be dedicated to a maintenance entity. So that's A1B. Now, the conflict here, again, is A2C. It says, if an existing private road will connect a minor subdivision or condo plat to the nearest existing public road, the road must meet International Fire Code standards. So essentially, how we would kind of consume that is, according to A1B, if the private road is fully within the boundaries of the proposed subdivision and it provides access to 5 or more, the portion of the plat must be improved to the standards of the highway district. However, this portion most likely will not be accepted by the applicable highway district because they do not have legal access to perform maintenance to this. And this is a question that we brought up recently to one of the highway districts, and they did confirm, it's like, we couldn't accept it. We couldn't even get access because we'd have to traverse through private roads to get to that section. And so we would not accept it. This portion of improved road will go without proper maintenance and will likely be never be accepted by the highway district in the future. Therefore, the applicant will have made these improvements to the associated highway district standards with no lasting benefit. This scenario is illustrated in example or exhibit B or 2 below. So let me just do that. So here's exhibit 2. You have a public road here. You have a private road that provides access. It traverses through the proposed 2-lot minor subdivision outlined here in the tan color. It provides access to 5 or more parcels, and therefore, as highlighted in red here, according to that section A1B, this part of the road, based on what our code says, is required to meet the highway district standards. Or the highway district can provide a recommendation or a
It
variance.
doesn't have to.
But they don't have to, and that's part of the problem that we've been getting, is that some highway districts are unwilling to provide a recommendation for a variance or deviation. So essentially, it leaves the applicant in the position of, you need to meet highway district standards for this red segment.
I'll be a little more blunt.
Okay.
We have one highway district that refuses to grant variances at all. The other 2 of them have granted variances.
Which one?
Lakes.
So that, go ahead, sorry.
And so it's been awkward, to say the least, where we've had some cases where we actually were able to finish a minor subdivision because the highway district agreed that it was silly to require highway district standards here. So they backed off and we got a fire district road here, and which makes common sense to get a 1/4 mile of fire district road here and going down. Lakes has said, no way, no how, nowhere will we ever do this at all. And that's just an ongoing conflict with that.
Which is another reason we're proposing these private road standards, because then it puts the purview back into the county.
Right.
So that is kind of to illustrate that first point. And then conversely, even though it has the same level of impact, if the road is not fully within the proposed subdivision, the applicant only needs to comply with International Fire Code. Therefore, even with the same level of impact on the same private road, an applicant may experience two different requirements of road standards. So the other illustration here, Exhibit 3, is where you've got, again, the same road. You've got a portion of that road where it's partially in, partially out. Because it's not fully within, it has a common driveway coming off of that existing private road to serve the two lots. This road, up until this point, only has to meet International Fire Code. So whether you're this person in Exhibit 2 or this person in Exhibit 3, you could have two entirely different road standards apply. It has the same level of impact, and like I mentioned earlier, we could possibly be requiring somebody to build these standards when it's never going to be maintained or dedicated by the highway district.
And where it gets weird to me is that one would hope all the highway districts would be reasonable, but they aren't. And Lakes has decided they're not going to grant these variances. And where they have the trump card is they get to sign off on the plat before it gets recorded. So in a case like this, where Lakes says, no, we're not doing that, we can't record the plat. Even though it makes good practical sense not to have to require that road. What?
Question, Stuart, does your proposal address this situation?
No, it doesn't directly address this situation. What we propose is that the only thing the highway districts, in our opinion, should be concerned with is the access, how this impacts the access onto their highways that they own, not how it impacts the private road back in there. That's why we wanted to propose the private road standards. Does that make sense?
So here's some of the offered solutions, at least that we've been kicking around. So one of them, of course, is 3 here, which Stuart has been introducing. Essentially a third-party option. I have in here, if we feel that IFC standards are not adequate, but HD standards, highway district, are unnecessary for minor subdivisions, and an intermediate standard could be implemented, and that's that approach. Number 1 is we could remove A1B entirely and solely apply A2C, which means just go back to International Fire Code. If this is appropriate to meet International Fire Code, then it's at the same level of impact, then this should logically.
But it may not be. We've just talked at length here for an hour and a half or something, saying that the IFC is not adequate by itself.
Yeah, so again, I think that's maybe where, if it sounds like, where we may be leaning is saying, look, maybe the third-party approach, Stewart and company, applying that to minor subdivisions may be the best approach.
See, the thing about this is that you've got a new proposal for a minor subdivision. And I think it's very short-sighted for us to say, okay, well, all we want is the same kind of a road going in here for a quarter of a mile without any change in the requirements with this new proposal. Even if they built the piece across the new proposal to an IFC plus structural standard or whatever we have, at least we've got a piece of that road that's a good road. You're not perpetuating this ongoing process of having an inferior road constantly being constructed. Mm-hmm. And so, and someone will say, well, it's unfair to the new developer. And I say, so what? Really? I mean, think about it.
Well, I don't know if it's unfair as long as it's roughly proportional to the cost of the development.
Well, true, but I mean, the problem with the whole thing, well, yeah, if they develop it, then they can charge the people
back the
Yeah,
cost.
yeah, well, they can, pay for the road with the
Right,
price of the.
and one would hope, so.
Yeah, or something, yeah.
David-
But the thing about it is that we shouldn't be perpetuating segments of these roads that are inferior standards. In some way, we gotta put a stop to that, I think, yeah.
David or Ben, I don't know if y'all have it readily available, that example you showed me in our meeting a few months back where the guy's, what, 3/4 of a mile down? He wanted to do a 2 split on 10 acres to 5, and they were saying he had to bring the whole road up to standard. I don't know if you
I'm not
recall that when you
recalling
showed
the-
me that.
That might be the last exhibit. I can't remember.
I don't know that I have any more.
Yeah, this here, I don't think would make that party, any of those two parties rebuild the whole rest of the road.
Right, yeah, that you just leave alone.
yeah. No, that'd be unfair, yeah.
I'm not remembering the scenario that you're,
Yeah, when we met
In my office.
your office that day, you showed it to us, and I can't remember exactly where it was.
We'll have to chew on that one. I don't remember either.
I'm confused, which is easily done. Stuart, you just told us that your proposal does not address the situation. But when you read that third solution, it looked like it did.
Well, we didn't write this to address this situation. That's what I was saying. We didn't write this. This can be applied here.
Understood, but does this, if we work this out, Stuart's proposal out, would it address this, that the road standard, whatever applied in this grid would apply to that? Is that?
I think it would have to be tweaked in order to fit what we're trying to do here.
But it's entirely possible. We
But
could
it's
just add
possible to
on
do.
to what the engineers have come up
Yeah,
with.
because my
to
suggestion
fit
would
this
be is when you
situation.
sit down with them and
Right.
look at that, if we can incorporate a solution here,
Right,
so we can make this simpler, it would be much better.
Yeah.
it seems to me.
right.
Yeah, and one of the things, and again, Stuart, you'll probably have to correct me on this. One of the things that we'll have to work on is, if we're looking at, say that's kind of the direction that we have, and we're looking at this third option, is part of those standards is to implement some kind of minimum width for easement or right-of-way. And part of the challenge that we would see is that, well, you've got, in this example, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4 property owners between that subject development and the public road. So if that existing road doesn't currently meet those easement width requirements, we're not quite sure, maybe Stuart, how these people would be forced to give additional easement for those road improvements in order to comply with the code.
Yeah, we don't think we can address that at all. That's more of a legal matter, and I don't
I
know how you would address that.
Yeah, the issue there is that if it was, if you had a public entity, highway district, you can condemn that part of it, you can condemn and take the
Right.
property. Problem here is to have a code provision that says they gotta give the property, now you're in a taking
Can't.
situation.
Right.
Right, but my, real quick, sorry to interrupt you, my point there then is, a lot of these private roads don't have easements that extend beyond the travel width. And so you may have a private road there that's 20 feet wide, maybe less, and the easement, it says over and across the existing travelway. And so if there's a standard that requires additional improvements beyond what's there, then that puts the property owners here, it forces them to say that we have to give up our property in order to allow for the subdivision to go through. And that may be problematic for the 2-lot developer here. It's like, I'm not able to get 6 additional feet of easement width from, these 4 property owners, and that essentially kills the subdivision. So there is some challenges, again, that we would need to consider in looking at a different option that requires improvements beyond and requiring
I
additional
don't think
easement width.
anybody's proposing that right now. I think all we're talking about is the standard for the parcel that's gonna be
Developed.
developed, yeah. No, and I agree, if some public entity wanted to take that road, because you're gonna build, there's 500 acres beyond there, so then the public entity could get the right of way through condemnation, yeah.
Well,
When you get the easements, it gets really, there's a whole variety of types of easements out there, and easements are a mess anyway,
Yeah.
Right.
in my view. But, I mean, a lot of the easements, particularly the older ones, don't have a width to them. They're just,
Yeah.
for use for this purpose or that purpose. And the property owners, or the parcels that benefit from the easement have a duty to keep it up. In fact, all of them do. And upkeep could mean expansion of the width, depending on, the easement. So I don't think you can write a code section that really addresses the easement problem so well. But one thing I did want to say is, I mean, on one side of the argument is Lakes is unreasonable because it's requiring this little piece of road to be improved. And it's silly because all the rest
And
of it.
they don't see it that way. They see it as they don't have the authority to grant this.
I'm gonna argue both
Yeah,
sides of it.
yeah.
You can say that's silly, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
On the other hand, you can say it makes a lot of sense because at least we're improving some of the road and we're creating, and over time it will help to improve the roads in the county. So I think it's really, I see logical arguments on both sides of that. Why you would want to
Well,
make sure.
Presumably, the whole reason we have the code we have is what you last said, is that over time, it's going to make things better.
Right.
The problem with that is that the over time can be 20 to 30 years.
And at that time, the highway district, should it, the incremental progress or improvements be made, finally reach that level of, that's been improved 20 years ago, they may say, that's too far. I mean,
It hadn't been maintained for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's lost its integrity.
Where are you guys coming from, your guidance when it comes to this problem? Are you leaning toward we need to do away with the requirement of that small stretch being improved? Or it would be good if we could find a way to improve the entire road?
I posit we need to also look at going, does it even make sense to allow this minor subdivision to go through if all we're getting is a half of a road that's safe? Because if you study this for a moment, you got half the road that's not even in this subdivision. And we can't make them do anything.
Right.
Here.
they would just
this
meet
new-
IFC standards.
Well, over here, it doesn't even have to meet IFC standards because it's outside of the subdivision.
It's on somebody else's property.
Yeah,
Well,
if it's not in an
The
easement.
way,
it's
the way that our
easement,
code currently is framed is that, IFC standards,
This should meet IFC standards, but going back to Stuart's point, right now, we don't know what the subbase is.
Well, David, the way, like I've just did a parcel right over here, off Syringa, and the homeowner or subdivider that is doing the development has the ability to go through and improve the road through somebody else's property as part of the easement. If it's an access easement, they can improve the road. They don't have to make the property owner pay for it, they pay for the
If they've got
improvement.
the easement.
If they have the easement,
The
correct.
problem we've got in a case like this or this is that sometimes this is a so-called prescriptive easement. It hasn't gone to court, so it hadn't even been adjudicated. The highway district just thinks they have a prescriptive easement. And so we don't have a bona fide easement from here to here or over here. And so have we really gained anything by getting even this little portion of the road to meet a new, better standard? I'm flummoxed, frankly. by this.
Isn't it a solution, though, to Exhibit 3, that if you require the minor subdivision, those two colored lots, that they have to give up, forget the other side of the road, that they have to expand the road into their property to meet the standards?
Right here.
Right, you gotta move your fingers over, they gotta give up that land and they have to move
So
the road.
At least this part would meet some kind of standard.
Yeah, because you can control them and what they're doing. You can't control the ones that the owners to the right in that example. But you could
That would make
require
a lot
them.
more sense to me, to just say,
That's what
you
I
can't
said.
have this subdivision unless your portion
Yeah.
of the road at least meets some minimum standard.
Yeah, you have to expand the road or move the road to meet whatever the standards are that we're going to apply.
well, again, currently, this is what, apologize for anybody on Zoom who can't see what we're doing.
Right.
But currently, our code would require this, because this is public, then you can't see this, I'm sorry. It says public here, this says private. So this is a public road, this is a private road. What our code currently requires is that this portion from here to here, at a minimum, meet the International Fire Code.
Okay.
They must have adequate easement, because we will not process the subdivision if they don't have adequate easement. So this is gonna meet IFC standards, and the fire district is currently gonna look at that portion. What we're talking about here is because this road isn't fully within the plat, it has the IFC standards that applies, and then you just build a common driveway to serve these two lots. This portion, the road is fully within,
Right.
and this meets highway district standards. So we're talking about two different
different
standards. Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm looking at is a solution on the one on the left, if we could come up with a code that says we have the IFC standard plus, our structural, whatever. Okay, that'd take care of that one. You don't require that guy down there to rebuild the whole thing out, yeah. Now, that one there.
You can't do it for this.
Yeah, that one there, I think that, there's no way that parcel owner there that's subdividing that parcel can guarantee that he's gonna be able to move over in somebody else's property and why, I would say that then, under that circumstance, you wanna have it set up so that the road is moved inward enough to meet the IFC standard plus the structural requirements on that property too.
So, just so that I'm kind of clear on what you're talking about, what you're saying is that whether it's this example or this example, that if we have a hybrid of IFC and this third-party proposal, that those standards of IFC apply from here to here,
No.
and then the third-party proposals apply here to here?
Yeah, because
Or in this case, here to here.
because that, if we required it clear out to the county road.
Well, we can't.
The thing about it is, somebody might have said 25 years ago that the piece from the county road into this new parcel met those standards. Maybe it didn't, I don't know. But anyway, but at least we would guarantee that the piece across the new subdivision met those standards. Now, the problem with moving it into that property, if you talk about private or flat land, that's one thing. But say that this road is built into a cut section like that, full bench section or something.
Right.
For this guy to move in, he's gonna have to go clear to the top of the hill and cut another section out like that.
Right.
That would be the problem if you had. If it's out on flat ground,
It's not an issue.
you got
But
the
it
road,
can be expensive.
you got the road that goes over onto the neighbor over here, and the property line is here. He could just move this over like this and,
Right. This can be expensive.
well, the only way to do that is to bring it down with an excavator or drill and shoot it.
And one hell of a retaining wall.
No retaining wall is required, that's just a cut. No
Well,
retaining
human
wall.
nature being what it
Not
is,
to scale.
if you create the
Well,
requirement,
retaining wall may be required.
Well,
Depends on
yeah,
the degree of cut and the stability of the soil.
Yeah.
yeah, the petitioning party is gonna look for the least, or the most economical way to do it. It might be going to the neighbor across the way and asking for a lot line adjustment to be able to incorporate that piece of the road into their property.
Yeah, that's the other thing, like you say, yeah.
We're
you
gonna
could-
try to figure the best way to do it, but if you
Yeah.
create the requirement.
If it's gonna cost him $100,000 to do this, and the neighbor will give him an easement for $25,000, then you just do it that way, yeah. But it would be up to the developer to do it then.
So, Stuart, is that kind of application the way that you are intending this to work? Because in my opinion, it seems,
Ben, quite frankly, we hadn't even thought about that kind of application for
Okay.
this. We're taking new subdivisions coming in and applying a better than the IFC standard to them, and not be required to, like your example here, go to highway district standards for an orphaned subdivision that the highway district could never service, won't ever service, and will never take into their jurisdiction. So
Right.
that was our intent behind this, because we've seen those examples. And, we've seen people, guy owns 20 acres, wanting to split it off and sell it, give a couple to his kids or whatever. He can't afford to do it because, it's gonna cost him $300,000 to put a road in to meet that. It's not worth it to him to do it, and we see that happening to people around the county. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this. So, I don't know if that answers your question, not or Ben,
Well-
I mean, because we really didn't think about the Exhibit 3, about how that applies. I mean, that would be, okay, I'm trying to move the road into your property, then we can build the road to meet this new standard, or whatever standard it meets.
But I guess the point is the new standard, whatever that would be, would only apply within the boundaries of the subdivision. It wouldn't apply from that point connecting it to the public road.
That was our intent.
Okay.
Because we can't force somebody to build. If it's in dedicated easement with maintenance agreements, maybe you can come to some kind of agreement. I don't know, but I don't think you have any enforcement mechanism to do that.
A, B, it doesn't pencil out for the homeowner or developer. The math doesn't work to go in and retroactively regrade and redo this
Yeah, right.
for 2 lots.
I think one of the issues that we hear from property owners that are subdividing about this issue on Exhibit 2 is we're gonna be doing these improvements. Meanwhile, the road leading up to this development is nowhere near that standard.
Right.
My concern is that we have the same issue then, even with applying this new third-party approach, if that's where we go, to say that they could build this to a new standard, but the road leading up to it meets International Fire Code, but if that's substandard, is that beneficial?
Well, Ben, I think what you'll see once we sit down and dig into what we've put together here, what we're talking about here, these obviously is a low-volume road. We're talking about maybe going from a 14-foot width to a 22-foot width with a gravel surface. So it's not, an exponential cost, but there would be a cost with it. And now we're gonna have a section that, in preparation, if any of the adjacent properties go to a split, then that road would be built out to that same standard and move forward that way. That's kind of how we're thinking with this. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Terry, don't perpetuate the.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that bothers me. I understand. If I had that parcel down there and I had to have a 4-wheel drive to get to it, and then you guys come in and say, okay, the road coming in here is 2 wheel tracks, and then the piece that I gotta build is 20 feet wide with 6 inches of crushed rock on it or something. I'd ask that question, but the government has to control this perpetual problem of creating these inferior pieces of infrastructure. Because somewhere down the road, there's a possibility that road would have to become a public road, see, or something. All you gotta do is have somebody die down there because you can't get the ambulance in there, or the fire truck gets stuck and it burns the 2 houses down on that parcel. And then you practically got to kill somebody nowadays to get anybody to do anything. And that's we need to get on top of some of these issues, and it's uncomfortable, and maybe we'll be bad guys if we have to do it or whatever, but why would you want to perpetuate the same thing across that new parcel as you have leading into there?
That's Ben's question.
Yeah, and that just doesn't make any sense to me.
That doesn't to me either.
No. So now this other thing where, like you said, it might be cheaper for the guy to go to this neighbor on the right and see if he can't get a 10-foot easement or something to get, but still that piece of road for that subdivision should meet this new standard, I think. Or whatever the guy has to do, cut the slope down with an excavator or get a piece of easement there. And if he can't get it, then they can come back to us and say, okay, hey, I'm having a problem with this.
Well, isn't it fair to say if you can't meet a minimum standard like this new one we come up with, then you can't meet the subdivision standards, you don't get to subdivide.
You just don't do it. There, that's the
Well,
point.
Commissioner Harwood, one thing with the highway district standards now, like Kootenai County's not all flat, correct? live in the mountains, yeah. Well, the Associated Highway Districts did away with their mountainous terrain standard, which
Oh, have
means
they?
no road can be greater than 6% grade now.
And that's true in major subdivisions.
That's true in major subdivisions, but now that's applying to minor subdivisions. They're forcing that on minor subdivisions, which is a lot stricter than the IFC, which is gonna make a lot of projects, you're not gonna be able to do them.
Now, what have they done? They've got back slope requirements and all kinds of stuff?
This
or-
is just it was with the geometric requirements for mountainous terrains, you could go up to 10% like the IFC.
It
They
might help
completely-
back up a little bit, and, because I don't think the commissioners know that the highway districts have their own road standards that all 4 districts have adopted, just like the fire district standard is adopted by the state. So within that associated highway district standard, they've done away with what used to be this mountainous terrain ability. So now you have to do a 6% or less grade, which means a fair number of major subdivisions cannot be designed and built because you can't get a 6% slope.
Get to this ground with the 6% slope.
Yeah, it's not doable.
Well, David, some of the highway districts have readopted that in their individual districts,
Oh,
is the
they
way it
did?
worked, yes.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
East side has. Because the
Okay.
east side is all mountains.
Okay, yeah, I had heard
Yeah,
that.
east side's all mountains. I'm sure Kevin's looking at it.
Okay.
Now, Post Falls would probably be looking at it too, and we know the one that's not gonna accept it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's actually good to know and helpful. Okay, so where does that leave us with?
Where's that one? Yeah,
I don't know if you can see that.
there's number 3 down
Solution number 3?
Yeah.
Can see that?
Isn't number 2 close to the 2016 requirement of your solutions?
It's close, but it's more of a matter of it being adjacent to an existing road that meets those standards. So it's kind of dependent on the proximity of it being adjacent to a public road. So the idea, I guess, in theory, is that if you are already adjacent to a road that meets the highway district standards, then you improve that section that meets the highway district standards. And then, in theory, you'd be progressing, but if that's not a perfect, I mean, I see a lot of problems with that too.
I notice you refer to a maintenance entity there. I'm sure in some of these examples, there is no maintenance entity, is there?
So that's kind of the different, problem 4, so I'll hide that. I mean, unless, and this is where you're talking about improvements or shared improvements that are solely within the plat. We don't have the ability to require maintenance of other improvements. So the existing private roads that are leading to the subdivision, again, in these 2 different examples, if the road is at this point required to be improved to the the fire district standards, the developer here would be responsible to do so to make sure that it is compliant with IFC. But there's nothing that requires these property owners to participate in a maintenance agreement.
Oh, right, yeah.
So we only have the ability to require any shared improvements within the subject subdivision to participate in that agreement.
So you could require those 2 parcels on the right there to have some kind of an agreement that they would maintain that piece of the road over there on the right-hand side.
This one here?
Yeah.
So this common driveway? Yeah, so exactly. So this particular subdivision would require a maintenance agreement that they share the cost, the improvements of that common driveway.
Okay.
Again,
Well, how about the piece out to the right?
the piece off to the right, I'm sorry,
The
this
private
one?
road. Yeah, would they?
No, because it's shared and it's partially off the property, we wouldn't include that as part of the maintenance responsibility of this plat.
Oh, because there's properties beyond that.
Yep.
Well, how about the one down there where that's the last property like that? Well, that wouldn't necessarily be the last property either.
Same exhibit, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I just,
Like one of these here, or?
no, that one down there on the left.
This,
Would you require a maintenance agreement with that one then, or?
this one here?
Uh-huh.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, is it shared infrastructure for this plat, and does it provide access beyond this plat?
Would do, yeah.
So if you were one of these property owners,
Uh-huh.
and you were required to maintain this portion of the road, you might have some issues with people further south of you that are not treating your road with the respect that you would want them to treat it as. And if they're not going to share in the cost because you are responsible for maintaining it, it seems like it sets up property owners for conflict. Oh, lost connection.
I did too, how weird.
Yeah, I can see why that would be
Well, there.
a problem. Well, you just gate it and then stand down there with a rifle or something. But I don't know. That's it. I don't know, that's it.
Something more from Texas truck like down south Idaho.
Making those people there in the new subdivision, you know, say you had 30 properties below that little piece there.
Right.
Which
They
is
can
not
pound
uncommon.
pound the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't set these future property owners up well.
Yeah.
I don't think we would be, and that raises the point again of if we're gonna require, even if it's a higher standard than IFC standards, who's gonna be responsible to maintain those improvements? Is it gonna be these two lot owners, and do the benefit of the property owners to the south enjoy that benefit, and that's just the way it goes? Or what?
Well, if you never build it to a good standard, it's gonna be more of a maintenance problem than it is if you build it to a good standard.
And one of the issues that we see a lot, you know, with these private roads, right? It's solely dependent on the private property owners to come together and say, all right, I'll chip in some money and we'll do a good job here. But some people don't participate.
A fair number of people don't
And-
want to participate.
Right. And so it's hard to design and require improvements where we see roads not being maintained and then they are quickly below that standard and not to be improved again. So it puts us in a hard spot. If we're gonna make another standard, how are we gonna make sure and ensure that there is appropriate maintenance to it?
Well, the example I have is, my subdivision has a subdivision-owned water system. And when the people in the subdivision don't pay their dues, or they don't pay their water bill, I put liens on their properties.
Right,
That's how they get the money.
right.
Probably out of left field, but. You know, if you really wanted to force improvement of the roads, both of these scenarios, you could require that the minor subdivision being created can only qualify if it can show the road connecting to the public road meets the standard that you're applying, whichever one it is. And that forces them into a situation where they have to negotiate with the other landowners and come up with a road maintenance agreement or expand an easement or do whatever you need. I mean, that is one way to solve this problem, is to say you can't do that minor subdivision unless you can get agreement with everybody, and that takes care of both those scenarios to create.
True, but that gives a lot of power to the other property owners as to whether or not that subdivision is going to be viable.
Sure does, yeah, sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it gives power to any one of them, because you can have someone who doesn't agree, but the argument would be, that's their problem. This is the person trying to change the status quo, they want to create a minor subdivision, they gotta figure it out. See, the problem here is if you had a public entity, we go back to that, the government could come in and condemn the property
Right.
and make the road. So the one way to look at this problem is, how do you get people to cooperate? See, in that situation, they don't have to cooperate. The government holds that stick of the bundle of sticks of property rights, so you can come in and take that property away. But if you did what I'm suggesting here, and I'm saying we should do it, but if you did that, you're forcing the property owners to figure it out. And then it becomes an economic cost, because you're right, there could be a holdout property owner there who says, I don't want to do it. And it forces the benefited property to go to them, the burden property, and say, well, I'll offer you more money. It's an economic decision then.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
economic-
we see this all the time, is that, people don't want additional traffic on their private road. And if they say, it doesn't matter how much money you're gonna pay me, I don't want more traffic. And so they're saying, I'm not signing off. The money, I mean, maybe they should do this discussion with the person before they put the money in and surveying and design and all that stuff, but, it can put a future applicant at a disadvantage because they're not able to get one person on board.
How is that different than the burden property saying, you're forcing me to accommodate greater traffic, further damage to my road, the road that accesses my property. So you're forcing me to incur those detriments. I mean, you can see the argument the other way around.
Sure.
Is you're forcing me to accept this growth that I don't want to accept. And it's hurting my property rights, or it's hurting me.
It's a fair point.
Too often, I think we look at this from the point of view of how we expand property rights to further develop, and the underlying assumption of that is it's always good. The person you're positing is the person that's saying that's not good. And I see that around my area quite a bit, that the detriment to the burdened properties is taking away their property rights. So, I mean, I can see it from both sides.
This is a complicated matter.
So it looks like that one of your proposed solutions is number 3, which it seems from our discussion is the one that we think the best of those 3. So,
Well, until we read it and go through it
Right.
and they go through it, we don't know.
right, but what I'm saying is, along with you looking at it for the other problem, is add that, and you can make whatever adjustments you think necessary to apply it to this problem. Is that possible?
Yes, ma'am, we can look at it.
Okay,
I
so,
can't make any promises, but we can definitely look
Sure.
at solutions.
Sure.
Present to her.
so, look at that as, because it seems like from our conversation, that seems the best option. We're never gonna have a perfect option. We're never gonna make everybody happy, but we need to do something and, or nothing, right? And this number 3 seems like, at least in my opinion, from, hearing our conversation, it seems like the best option. Am I wrong? Am I?
Well, it fits the
Or-
other.
Or
it
best,
fits- yeah,
best
it-
possible,
Yeah.
best possible option.
It fits the other discussion we had, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly,
I think the
exactly.
logical sequence is they get together and
Exactly.
come to some sort of final proposal that we can look at and
Right.
look if there's unintended consequences and
Yeah.
how it affects.
Exactly.
And I do want to leave open this concept of maybe we want to apply it to the whole road. I know you don't like that.
I like it. I think it's good.
Here's my thing. If we believe that IFC standards are inadequate, which I think that there are times that they are, and I think there are times that they probably are fine. But if we believe that they are largely inadequate, then I think it would be prudent to have the entire portion of that road improved, as long as it meets the rational nexus criteria and all that.
Right.
Then I think it makes sense to have it improved rather than leave this part as IFC, improve this small section. It makes more logical sense, but again, it's too early for me to conclude that, I guess.
Well, and I would posit that it's highly likely, if not probable, in almost every case where you would say the IFC standard is sufficient. Well, it's because the road already is so well built, it meets a higher standard.
Sure.
Because this whole concept that now today I'm starting to get of the structural issue that you have to deal with, that he's dealing with, and the IFC sort of, can we get in and out issue. Well, initially, until today, I thought they were pretty much the same. They're not the same issues. They both have to be dealt with. I honestly would be in favor.
I think it'd be wonderful if we could get the whole road to
Yeah,
the
if you're gonna come
IFC
in.
standard plus the structural thing. I just don't know
You need to
how,
meet the whole standard.
that's,
Now, you can't, from a legal standpoint, go in and get into takings problems and all that by us doing it. But when you require that you're not gonna give the permit unless it meets the standard to the road, you're probably legally okay. Pat will tell you, but I think you're okay there.
Subdividing is a privilege, and you just don't get to subdivide if you can't meet minimum standards.
Don't have a property right to subdivide, that's right. If you're gonna do it, you're gonna burden that road more, then you have an obligation to figure it out.
Right.
To maybe meet the standard. I know that sounds pretty harsh to some people, but the more I see this piecemeal problem here,
it's just nuts. The other thing about this is, I guess if you assume that the first however many properties up there, that met the IFC standard, at the time or whatever, up there.
Or realistically, didn't meet any standard.
Or didn't meet any standard, you could still, we could work with the new developer and say, okay, the thing is a bog, I mean, it's in the, you can't get through there hardly in the wet season or something. At the very least, you could require the new subdivider to, build up the subgrade, so you could have year-round traffic on it or something. Say the requirement down there is a 22-foot top width and the rest of that road's 18 or 16, you could still have them put 6 inches of crushed rock on it or something and at least make it passable in the wet season and stuff like that. That would be better than nothing at all, so. But that's that's whether or not you want to go that far, which would basically, if this individual's unwilling to do that, well, then they can't subdivide it, But you can improve an existing road and not necessarily have the template, the idealized template, for the road. You can, and it could still meet the accessibility for the vehicles because it's still got the minimum radiuses and stuff like that in it, but the biggest problem is the fact that you bog down when you try to drive on it in the spring or something, so.
Yeah, for any of us who want some practical examples of this, boy, come down my area, probably any area of the county, drive around if you get off the beaten path. During the COVID craze around me when we had all this development, and I'm not talking about the place across from us, but there's another 180 acre parcel that was sold off at various parcels, and it's really hilly, and you have this complicated problem with the roads where some people are conscientious putting good roads, but then there's sections of the roads that are just horrible, and into bogs, going downhill into bogs. I mean, I don't even know how a fire truck could ever get in there, and I don't know what they did to meet the standards, but it's just a nightmare. So the more we can impose uniform standards to be applied, the better, it seems to me.
So the outcome of this is we need to get you three together and evaluate the standard, because you haven't had a chance to.
Right.
You haven't had a chance to.
Right.
So then you can get back to us
Sure.
as soon as you can, but
Yeah.
obviously it's not gonna be next week.
Right.
But, so that's where we stand, I think. Do
Yeah.
I have, is that everyone's understanding? Yeah. And then Commissioner James had a question here. Do we need to follow up on our vote to publish a statement supporting Commissioner Matari's proposed dashboard? Was that just, do we need, I mean, has our recommendation gone to the Board of County Commissioners in some formal way? I mean, we
no.
voted
Right.
and Commissioner Matari heard us vote, but do we need to publish some kind of statement?
No, you don't. The minutes of the board
Yeah,
are sufficient to
I
stand.
thought about the same question, but I think it's documented in the minutes
The
of
minutes-
the meeting as approval by us, I think.
Yeah, we talked about a statement, so I put together a statement, because I didn't know if
Right.
we needed to put together a statement, or if the minutes are good.
No, it's fine. The
No,
minutes
great.
serve as your
Good
decision.
Is our position.
I just didn't want him to think we were disrespecting.
No,
Oh, right, well, and we want to make sure it gets to the board that
Yeah.
we made that recommendation.
By virtue of it being in the minutes, it got to the board.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Do I need to give you this back?
No, I've got it on file. So go ahead.
Okay, because I'd like to start looking.
So, if there's nothing else,
I do have one other thing, but I'm totally willing to defer that to another time.
well, is it?
What's your
appropriate
preference?
here? You want to take another 10 minutes or something?
How involved is it?
I think it's pretty quick,
Okay.
but
Relatively.
I know how that goes sometimes. It's okay. So A2B, as I've referenced here below, it's the same section referenced above, 86707,
There.
86707, but this is A2B. It says appears to be really meaningless as far as applicability because property owners and developers are getting around this requirement fairly easily. So essentially what is happening, A2B, it says if a new road is to be constructed between a minor subdivision and the nearest existing public or private road, the road shall comply with the standards, meaning the highway district standards. So this is for a new road. If you're going to build a new road to get to your property for the purposes of the subdivision, then it needs to meet the highway district standards. If the road will connect to an existing public road, it may be dedicated and so on. The problem here is what people are essentially doing is saying, well, if I have to build a highway district standard road for a new subdivision, or if I have an existing private road that just meets IFC standards, maybe I should just build this road first before I apply for the subdivision. And so they build the road.
There's nothing that prevents them from doing it.
There's nothing that prevents them from building an access road to their property. I mean, you got 20 acres there, you can get access, assuming you have legal access, you can get a permit for construction of access to that 20-acre parcel. So that's what people
It
do.
becomes an existing road.
So now it's
Doesn't have to meet the
existing.
standard.
And so really, this section doesn't seem to have a whole lot of value or meaning.
I think you could strike the whole lot. It's meaningless
Yeah.
at the current.
This
So-
is where-
And they
this
can
is
just
where
go out
they're-
and build a road, you know.
This is where they're violating the Forest Practices Act.
Well, I mean, that's a different
No,
agency.
because they pull a permit.
They pull an FPA permit.
And then that meets that.
Right, exactly, then they've got an existing road.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so how our code works is this, is that there is an exemption for an FPA, Forest Practices Act permit through IDL, Idaho Department of Lands. It allows you for road construction for the purposes of logging if you're harvesting timber. That is an exemption in our site disturbance code, so people can do that without a permit from us. However, if you
Use
choose
it for house.
to convert that road to another use, you're no longer using it as a logging road, but you're going to use it for residential purposes or whatever, then it requires a site disturbance permit from us in order to make that conversion. So, yes, they can put the road in through IFP, or FPA, sorry, Forest Practices Act. We're not getting a permit from us, that's all legal. Then when it comes time to convert that, then they come in for a site disturbance permit from us. But again, they do that before subdivision application. It's an existing private road. It only needs to meet IFC standards. So there is rarely a time when people understand that this section is not, it's just rarely applied because people are like, I don't want to build a highway district standard road, I'm going to build an IFC standard road. So I'll just do it before I apply for the subdivision. So the solution essentially is remove that section entirely as compliance with IFC standard is adequate. Or again, if this third party option or hybrid approach would be appropriate, that would fit into that first solution.
Cover that. It would-
Yeah, yeah.
I think removing it is fine, because we're covering the dealing with an existing road through this process we've been discussing for 3 or 4 hours here, yeah.
But
Okay.
isn't one of the things that IDL's looking at is they go in and this is not a logging road. This is-
Yeah, they have a hard time because it's more of a subjective call as to whether or not it's meeting a standard logging road or if it's beyond the scope of a logging road. They don't have, this is what a maximum standard is for a logging road. And so people again, are creative and they find ways around things, and so they build their logging road to meet IFC standards. It meets all the requirements of code, and so they just build it that way. Then they're like, well, I just fill out the paperwork for a permit. I don't need a plan because it's already constructed. It's just about stamping this thing and going from one desk to the next, so to speak. So,
But
if you-
it gets tricky with a subdivision because when it's supposed to meet IFC standards and it was a logging road, it typically doesn't meet IFC standards.
it all depends, yeah.
And then we're in a bit of a difficult situation because usually the grade is the thing
Right.
that doesn't pass muster.
Well, and that's where property owners should be looking at it, from the beginning
Yeah.
and their future and saying, okay, if I am planning on subdividing this from, that's my end goal here, then I want to make sure that I build this forest practices road to the minimum IFC standards. I don't want to have to build something in twice. I mean, yeah, so.
Right.
So anyhow, or another option is to further clarify what existing private road is and putting some time frames on that. My preference would be, again, looking at just removing it entirely, but certainly interesting.
What do you need from us?
Nod to say remove it entirely.
I move, remove it entirely.
Sounds good.
Second?
Need a motion, I motion is to remove it entirely. That's what you guys want, right?
I'll second it.
All in favor? I'm taking over your role.
No, who seconded that?
Terry did. Any discussion?
And we had a vote, everybody,
Yeah, of course we did.
no, I think we did.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That's helpful. One little one down. We can move on. All right. Well, that was
That's
useful.
it.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
the end of the document.
Every little bit of movement in the right direction is useful. I'm an incrementalist. All right. Thanks for your
Well,
time.
Let us know when you
Yeah.
have a chance to go through
Okay.
all this. And other than that, I think we have the hearing coming up on the 28th. If they can get through some of this, we can
Will that be
get
in
to
this
the meeting.
area here, room here? or-
Yes,
In this
it'll be-
room, we
you'll
will
be
sitting
right up there.
Oh, we'll be up there?
Yeah.
All right.
And we get to be targets.
Do we get name plaques?
Yes.
Uh-huh. You already have
Oh,
them.
really?
Yeah.
What time should we be here prior to that?
It's at 6.
Well, it's
Yeah,
at 6.
5:30? Be here at 5:30?
Actually, 10, 15 minutes before the meeting starts is good enough.
Are we planning on making a decision at the hearing, like going into executive session or having public discussion? Or we'll discuss that at the hearing and
We-
decide it?
Okay.
Usually-
We should probably go through the
Yes,
That's the 29th, isn't it?
28.
28?
we go through first thing, we just introduce it. David introduces the issue. Then we put it, the next thing is public input. Then we close that and go into deliberations. And we deliberate.
Typically make a decision that day.
Yeah, you typically make a decision. Now, there have been times that we haven't,
Right.
and then put it off and gone into an extended another day. But we typically have deliberations and come up with a recommendation, which is what we are doing. We're not actually
Right.
deciding the
Right.
issue.
Right.
Then it goes to the Board of County Commissioners for them to make a decision, which may be a couple months down the road. But that's how it works.
Dumb question, this has to do with the minor subdivision solution, is there a minor subdivision solution?
No,
No.
this has to do, this is the tribal.
10 acre.
10 acre limit
Rule.
for,
10 acres
10
instead of
acres.
5 is a minimum lot size.
Yeah, okay, got it, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
now,
Premature, yeah.
do you, does anybody feel like we should have another short workshop before that time? to review that issue?
I think we.
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of that 28th, I've got to be like, from 9 until 4 or something like that. I got to meet with ITD and IDEQ and Kellogg. So I'll be smoking my way down the hill to get here by 6 o'clock. So
How
I
close are
forgot.
we to getting to the minor subdivision, the hearing on that? I mean, that would be great to get to that issue.
We talking about the serial minor thing?
How to deal with certain minor subdivisions, the solution.
Well, we haven't begun to put that into an actual code form yet.
Yeah, that's what we voted on last time, was to turn that over to putting it into an ordinance.
So that's something that we could probably bring up to Pat tomorrow at our staff meeting. See
Just to ask him what
if we
his
can get some kind
timeframe
of
is.
timeframe on that.
And then once he's got it in that, we need to come back to our group to discuss the wording and make sure that we all understand what is,
And if we're going to have that,
reports to what we
that other
decided.
document as a trailer or whatever you're going to have, that document will have to be done too. The one, the one that the engineers put together. That one.
Oh,
If
for
we're
the
gonna
road
have-
infrastructure.
Yeah, if
Well-
we cite that in the code, then we got to have that thing done.
It could come in at a different time.
Can it? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Think-
As long as we set up the first round so that it doesn't create a conflict with the second round, we're fine.
That's, yeah, okay, that's what I'm concerned about. Okay.
I think we can do that.
I think if we tried to blend the two, it's gonna really hold us
Yeah.
back on going the serial minor route. Or just get it done quicker, so.
But of course, if we set up that code, then we better be pretty quick with the other document, because someone might come in with a proposal and they've got to know what their requirements are gonna be, so.
Well, in the meantime, we will be working on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Presumably, you guys will come up with something and bring it back to us, and we'll be discussing that. So while minor subdivisions are working its way through the process, we'll be working on the roads.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay.
Thanks for your time.